Hello and welcome back to Newsworld. The Africa Rising International Film Festival is back and will be taking place next month from the 27th to the 30th of November in the Newtown Precinct. Ariff began last year as a pre-event to the Global Festival Week in South Africa and Mandela 100 Festival. It ran from the 26th till the 29th of November last year. The launch for this year's edition was held earlier this week at the National School of Arts in Braamfontein and was attended by the who's who of the film and television industry. And to tell us more about the film festival, we're joined in studio by organizers Lala Tuku of Corporate Icons Media and Ayanda Sithebe of Actors Space. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Someone's phone must have dropped there, but that's okay. I mean, what is a way to start an interview with a bang?
It's an intro.
Trusting actors to come in with all the drama. Let's talk about the Africa Rising International Film Festival. Can I call it Ariff?
Yes,
that's
for
what
sure.
we're calling it.
Sure.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, I don't want to be that guy, but it's now in its second year. Let's talk about last year and what we have in store for this year. But how the reception to the film festival was last year?
I mean, last year we only had like 2 months to sort of put together the film festival.
Wow.
And yeah, so
talk about procrastinating or performing under pressure.
Yeah, no, totally. And for me, the big thing is how everyone just came together to make it happen. You know, we as a collective, me, Lala, Kweku Mandela, we saw a big gap, you know, to say, you know what, our storytelling is not sort of captured in a beautiful way through a film festival. You know, what can we do? And Global Citizen as well wanted to leave a legacy behind, you know. So it's over 1,000 young people really coming together to make sure that a film festival happened.
Wow.
with international films, local films. I mean, we opened with Matwetwe, which went on to become a big success, you know. So last year was really, really an amazing time for us.
Okay, Lala, then let's talk now film festival now. I mean, obviously, we've got many film festivals, you know, and I think that's a wonderful thing that we are providing this platform because that's what the film festival does. It provides a platform to the actors, to the filmmakers. I mean, in recent weeks, we've seen so many stories about actors and actors' rights. And before we touch on that, this film festival, what sets it apart?
Look, for us, I think, you know, you hit it there on the head in terms of what sets it apart. And there are a lot of film festivals. Yeah. Firstly, film festivals create that opportunity where industry can come together and they can network, their work can be seen, and then probably have distribution deals. But for us, it was around development and transformation. So I'm going to talk you through our pillars. So it was developmental. It's transformation. It was around inclusivity. It was around the preservation of memory, which includes, obviously, we're very excited this year to announce our Pan-African series.
Yes.
And it was around bringing, you know, the African voice together. And then very interestingly, we're obviously moving towards the 4IR. So we've got a very strong digital hub focus as well. We were very intentional in terms of what we seek to address. So we've got gaps in the industry, transformation being one of them. And our festival really aims to profile women, young people, queer members of our society, and people living with disability. So it's really about those voices that have been left in the shadows, and we're here to promote those.
I love that you have all of these different elements that you just said. And do you think that's also a number one reason? You often hear this critique coming with filmmakers and you know, in the film industry, and it's the same thing that we're being fed all the time. There's just not enough original stories being told. And do you think that way, by being more inclusive, by addressing issues of transformation, addressing members of the public who've been excluded, it kind of also addresses, Ayanda, the lack of storytelling or the individual storytelling, new, fresh ideas? I mean, or do you think that's a problem that we still have?
It's a huge problem, and I think what we try to encourage as Ariff is the ability to have the bravery as well to share your story. You know, sometimes we box storytelling to this one big feature films that has to be 1 hour, you know, but every story is important. And for us is how do we create different or inspire different ways of telling those stories, that you can tell any story in a minute, you can tell it in 5 minutes, you can tell it in an hour, you know. So I think us opening up and becoming a very inclusive film festival opens up to anyone who wants to share their story.
Okay, Lala, let's also maybe talk about the other challenges. I mean, the both of you obviously are in this industry, you're professionals in the industry. Some of the challenges for filmmakers and actors, I think one of the biggest things would be business commerce. I mean, funding seems to be a massive problem, you know, especially particularly with local films. There's just not enough funding, not enough support. How are we addressing that issue? I mean, obviously there must be some aspect of this film festival that is addressing this as well.
So what we have in the film festival is we've got roundtable conversations, and these are industry-facing conversations where we're going to sit around the table and tackle things like funding, tackle things like distribution, tackle things like ownership of your content. You know, as you said, rightly said earlier, is that there isn't enough funding. So now filmmakers have to now start understanding the business side of film. How else can I get my film made? Not in 5 years, because we know films can take 5 years. Wow. But so it's around also thinking outside the box, going to private funders, whether you're doing crowdfunding. So it's those kind of platforms that we want to create. But very importantly for the young people as well, because new entrants into the film industry struggle, and it takes them a while in order to kickstart and, you know,
I mean, and I think that's, you mentioned a very important point there, Lala, as well. It's like being a filmmaker, there's also a business aspect to this. And many filmmakers are young and up-and-coming filmmakers or people who want to be actors forget that part of this business is that it is a business and that you still need to be able to run a business. And it's not just about creating content. It's how do you get someone to buy the product? Because you're selling a product, and
of course,
is what it is. What should we not miss out at the festival? I mean, it's going on for a few days. I mean, the days I see at 27th to the 30th of November. So this is a 3-day festival, which means jam-packed. I mean, you mentioned roundtable discussions. We'll talk about some of the movies that we can expect to see there or being screened. But what should we not miss out for? What do we need to look out for at Ariff?
I think my biggest passion project within the festival is what we call the Film Child, you know. So we bus in a number of kids, you know, from disadvantaged communities to come watch films. For the first time, you know, and for us that speaks to really cultivating imagination as well in young people. So, and we encourage anyone can join those kids and experience that magic in cinema. You know?
That must be such a lovely experience to see these little kids experiencing a movie for the first time. And it's something that you take for granted a lot. Is that I mean, it's such a privilege to be able to watch a movie on a big screen. It is. You know?
I mean, and what we try to do this year, what we are going to do, is that give them more than just probably that cinema experience, but give them kind of a TED Talk style in terms of what is animation. We know statistically and from research that there aren't a lot of black people that participate in animation. It is very expensive. So again, it's around the behind the scenes.
And the transformation, like you're saying, it's important. It's important, you say, statistically, and I believe you, there are not enough, you know, black names involved in animation, and it's definitely something that needs to be addressed. You mentioned the PanAfrican Legend series, and this year you'll be honoring a legendary filmmaker. Tell us a little bit more about the PanAfrican Legend series. It's obviously something new that you are bringing in this year compared to last year.
So we sat down and we thought, and I mean, I think we engaged also with the Department of Arts and Culture. You know, and true to our name, Africa Rises, we really want to see the rise of the proud African story. But what we realize is that before we can rise, we have to also know where we come from. I had the privilege of attending a film school, and in terms of the references that are used, is around the European filmmaking style and ways. And we have African cinema that we have not been exposed to. So what we're going to do during the series is really showcase African cinema. And that's why we say the preservation of memory in terms of who we are, our identity. I mean, in the past 2 months or so, we really, you know, suffered as a country. There's xenophobic attacks. And so through film, we want to show, you know, the unity of being African.
And I assume that is also what sets Africa Rising International Film Festival apart from other film festivals, is that it does speak to the African cinematic experience, I mean, which is obviously something that I never would have thought of, is that we do have different, African cinema is different, it is set apart, and you know, we probably don't give that as much attention that it does deserve. Let's talk about also, I mean, we spoke about the finance challenging about filmmaking. Is it difficult getting started or to keep going?
That's a difficult one. I think
I can tell you now, if I was a filmmaker, and I hear stories all the time, and I've spoken to filmmakers before, and you know, actors, and they've come on, and I mean, recently we saw the whole debacle regarding actors demanding more regulation in terms of labor contracts, you know, and labor law. I would just give up. I mean, like, I can't deal with this anymore. I mean, arts and culture is a thing. It is difficult. I mean, you know, difficult to get in, but then to keep going.
I mean, for me, is I think there's a lot of, obviously, there's a lot of dialogue that needs to happen,
Yeah.
you know. But for me, as filmmakers, we need to get to a point where we get to understand the entire value chain of filmmaking, you know. And I think that's why we want to speak to access as well, information. I think there's a huge lack of information out there, you know. We've got young people who really just banning to be creative, you know, create films or being in front of the camera, performing and stuff. But just that access to information is so limited, you know. How expensive data is, you can't expect anyone to do proper research wherever they are, you know. We find ourselves, everyone needing to come here into Joburg where the premium schools are or access to information is, but if you go to rural areas, there's no information. So I'm just burning with this story that I want to tell. I don't know how I want to tell it, I don't know, but I know I want to tell the story. So I think access to information is very key.
Okay, access to information. Lala, what do you think one mistake that filmmakers, people in the industry keep on making that you've seen? I mean, obviously, you've been in this industry for a while. You've now got, you're one of the organizers behind a film festival that is growing in leaps and bounds. What is that one mistake that you've seen?
You know, I'd like to speak to why we make films. We make films so that our audiences can watch it. So I think the most important thing is understanding the audience in which you're making the film for.
Yes.
You know, the NFVF conducted a study around audience research in terms of what do people actually want to watch? Is it a rom-com? Is it horror? Is it what? Because at the end of the day, it is going to be about the box office numbers. At the end of the day, it's a business.
Yes.
And so we almost needed to move away from making films for ourselves.
Passion projects.
Passion projects.
Yes.
And really saying, commercially, where would my film sit? So that when then, you know, an audience comes to the cinema, they can choose that.
Right.
So meaning marketing becomes quite critical. You know, in Hollywood, you get to know about who's in the film before it's even made.
Yes.
So our budgets in South Africa, because, you know, it's a development, we're still developing, our budgets are really geared towards the developing and the making of the film.
Movie.
You know, and I think there needs to be equal budget for the marketing of the film. So it's around getting creative in terms of how am I going to attract my audiences.
Create a buzz months before.
Absolutely.
Before we let you go, some of the films being screened at the film festival, maybe walk us through that quickly.
For sure. I'm really excited about our opening film, which is Unbreakable, a documentary on Busiswa.
Oh.
So we're very excited to screen that. Our closing film I'm very excited about, which is Queen and Slim.
Okay.
So and just balancing, you know, from the content that we're showing. So I'm very excited about those two films.
Well, there we go. 27th to the 30th of November, Newtown Precinct. It is the Africa Rising International Film Festival. We're joined in studio by two of the organizers, Lala Tuku of Corporate Icons Media, as well as Ayanda Sithebe of Actors Spaces. Ticket sales, are they free? Are we going to buy tickets?
So we've partnered, we're continuing our relationship with Global Citizen. So most of our tickets will be taking actions.
Awesome.
So we'll soon load it on the Global Citizen platforms.
There you have it. Just check out the Global Citizens platform. I'm sure they also have a website as well. Newsworld's going to take a short break. Stay tuned.